Rockets raining down on Ashkelon overnight. And actually, we've got injuries on the ground there in Israel. So we're going to talk more about that in just a second. Also, some shocking news that maybe isn't so shocking. The Iranian government, it looks like it was caught red-handed funding October 7th, the attacks of 2023. So we're going to talk more about that on this condensed version of today's live for April 7th, 2025. I'm Chuck Holton, and this is the Hot Zone. Thank you for watching. Now, let's get right into it. Hamas fired 10 rockets at Israel overnight out of central part of Gaza, the neighborhood of Deir al-Balah. Those rockets, 5 of them were intercepted by the Iron Dome. 4 of them landed in open areas and didn't hurt anybody, and 1 landed in a residential area of Ashkelon. And 27 people were taken to the hospital for evaluation. Now, some of them just had panic attacks. Some of them tripped on the way to the bomb shelters. And there were 7 or 8 that were hit with shrapnel. No serious injuries, but even still, that's the first time that we've had actual injuries from one of these attacks in months. And it's the worst barrage coming out of Gaza since August. So very serious. The most serious part is that it came out of this area of Gaza that the IDF has not been into before. Deir al-Balah in the central part of Gaza has been left pretty much alone, and it is now a smoking crater where the launch site was. There's some concerns that may lead to Hamas claiming that Israel killed some of the living hostages. They just the Hamas just released a propaganda video yesterday that showed 2 of the Israeli hostages, and of course, it's very torturous for the Israelis to see that. It's meant to cause division and dissension among the Israelis, and unfortunately, it works pretty well. But it wouldn't you wouldn't put it past Hamas to have those guys now turn up dead and they say, oh, Israel caused this by their airstrikes or something like that. Israel has been striking very hard across Gaza. They've hit over 130 terror infrastructures in the over the weekend, and eliminated dozens of militants. There's a lot of fighting going on in Gaza right now. Some of the key figures that were killed include Mohammed Awad, a senior commander of the Mujahideen terror group, who was one of the guys responsible for the murder of the Bibas family. So he got his comeuppance. Another guy with a name I can't pronounce, it was the central money exchanger for Hamas. And taking him off the board makes it much harder for them to pay their people and buy more weapons and all that sort of thing. Then another guy, Mohammed Salah Mohammed Bardawil. I bet it took him a long time to learn to write his name in school. He was a propaganda and psychological terror operative who was one of the guys who's filming these proof of life videos, and they eliminated him as well. Of course, Hamas claims that he was a legitimate journalist, and no, he's not. He was in Israel on October 7th. He was filming himself next to a burning Israeli tank on October 7th. So that guy got smoked. Israel continues to expand the buffer zone inside Gaza and along in eastern Khan Yunis. The entire Rafah area between Rafah and Khan Yunis is under evacuation warning right now. They're also constructing what they call the Morag Corridor, which is between the Philadelphia corridor and Khan Yunis. So it's kind of north of Rafah a little bit. And that's to help stop some of the contraband smuggling that continues to take place out of Egypt. They're now using drones to drop weapons and explosives and ammunition and stuff over the fence into Gaza. And so they've created this new corridor as another way to partition Gaza. And that partition is likely to stay there for a long time. The longer this goes on, the more time that elapses when Hamas is still fighting and not giving up their hostages, the more ground that they're going to lose. And the people of the Palestinian people of Gaza will have less and less land to live on. And that's the strategy right now. The IDF is also investigating that incident where the 15 aid workers were killed on their they were in a convoy of emergency vehicles on the 23rd of March. Uh, it turns out at least 6, possibly 9 of those workers were wanted Hamas terrorists. And now there's 2 things about this. First of all, the convoy did not have permission to be on the road that they were on. And that road was a place where there was a known presence of the IDF. And it was, the word had been put out, if you want to travel on this road, you have to coordinate with the IDF first to be able to travel through there. This convoy did not do that. They turned onto this road at a very high rate of speed and ran right up onto a IDF checkpoint or ambush, and they got lit up. So for that reason, because they did not coordinate ahead of time, there is some reason that you could say that it was a legitimate target. They were in emergency vehicles and they did have lights going, but Israel has seen that many times before, where the Hamas fighters have actually used ambulances to transport their fighters or to attack Israel with ambulances. So just the mere fact that you're in an emergency vehicle does not give you blanket immunity in Gaza anymore, and that is all at the feet of Hamas. But the IDF maintains that since they didn't coordinate the use of that road and were carrying wanted, known Hamas terrorists, that it made them a legitimate military target. Hamas published a propaganda video, like I said, with Bar Cooperstein and Max Herkim in it. Since becoming the IDF chief of staff, the new general Io Zamir has been meeting with the families of the hostages every Saturday and explaining to them what's going on in Gaza, what they're trying to do to get their people back. There are still protests going on inside Israel where some of the families are joining and calling for Israel to surrender to Hamas, to basically just give up in order to get their hostages back. They're saying that's the only thing we can do is just give up. And of course, that's a non-starter with most Israelis and the Israeli government. Okay. Returning the hostages is a top priority, but they can't do it by surrendering. Now, let's move on to Iran. Iran has placed its military on high alert and has been warning its own people to be ready for military attacks from the United States and Israel. They've also put their Gulf neighbors on notice, including Iraq, Kuwait, the UAE, Qatar, Turkey, and Bahrain, and told them not to assist U.S. Or Israeli forces in attacks. That is, either in attacking Iran or shooting down rockets that Iran shoots at Israel. And of course, Iran has made those threats before and they didn't follow through on them. So I don't think anybody really pays much attention to them right now. Israel, for its part, is preparing for a potential Iranian strike. They think there's some rumors that Iran might preemptively strike Israel, because Iran has been saying since the last time there was a strike, and that's in October, that they were going to attack Israel again in retaliation for Israel's retaliation of the retaliation of the retaliation. And so the United States has moved a second THAAD missile battery into Israel, and that means that we've got more U.S. troops on the ground in Israel, defending Israel, actively involved and at risk. And that's something for us to keep in mind and keep in our prayers. Israel Katz revealed that, that's the defense minister, just recently, that Iran delivered $500 million to Hamas over 2 years in response to written requests from Yahya Sinwar and Mohammed Deif to Iran, saying, if you give us this $500 million, we will use it to effectively destroy Israel. And so the Ayatollah Khamenei was just saying how they don't have any proxies. Those guys aren't proxies, but as it turns out, they are. And it's in writing. This is a smoking gun, folks. This is exactly what Israel has been saying all along, what we've all known all along, but what Iran has been denying. Well, they can't deny it any longer because they have the receipts. These were papers that were captured inside Gaza on a mission over the last few days. So Israel is preparing for the possibility Iran may attack with another huge assault of ballistic missiles, with coordination between the United States and U.S. military is reaching their best ever level. So, on that note, it is not really being reported much in the news, and this is probably the most important part of this whole video. The mainstream media is not reporting on the fact that Israel has not lost one soldier since the hostilities have recommenced in Gaza about a month ago. Even though they have more troops on the ground in Gaza, they are fighting in more places, they're dropping more bombs, they're hitting more targets, but they haven't lost any soldiers. So what's the difference between now and before, when they lost, so far about 481 soldiers have been killed in Gaza? Well, as it turns out, the difference is the Trump administration is letting Israel have all the munitions that it asks for. Now, we're not giving them those munitions, they're buying them, but Israel has been asking for these munitions for a long time. Things like the JDAM, shoulder-launched missiles and that sort of thing. Israel is now able to get all the munitions that they want, and that is allowing them to change their tactics. So they go into, instead of sending men into buildings to clear those buildings and then wire the buildings up for destruction if they find that it's got military use, they're now able to fly a drone into those buildings and find out whether or not it's a military target, and then just flatten that target from far away rather than putting their troops at risk. And that has saved lives. And what that means is that the reason they weren't getting those munitions before is because the Biden administration was not allowing them to have the munitions they needed. And that means that the Biden administration has blood on its hands of IDF soldiers. That if they had given Israel the stuff that they needed on time when they asked for it, a lot fewer soldiers probably would have died. And I think that bears repeating everywhere, far and wide. So I hope you will share this video with your friends. Now, the Houthis in Yemen claimed responsibility for launching an attack drone at Tel Aviv over the weekend. It was intercepted by the IDF, no injuries or anything like that. The crazy thing was it was intercepted over the Dead Sea, which means that it made it into Israeli airspace. It didn't set off any alarms. So that's bad. Good that they shot it down, though. The U.S. conducted 6 airstrikes yesterday on Houthi-controlled areas in the northern part of Yemen. No casualty figures on that. The IDF is continuing to make strikes inside Lebanon, taking out important Hezbollah operatives and Hamas operatives in Lebanon. That tells us, A, the Mossad is still very active there and making lists of people that need to be smoked, and B, Hamas is not just in Gaza. They're also in Lebanon and in the West Bank areas. We're talking about Judea and Samaria. At least 9 terrorists were arrested over the weekend there. They also uncovered a couple of plots to commit terror attacks and a stockpile of combat equipment, including weapons and magazines and a large amount of ammunition. They're also cracking down on people throwing rocks at cars in Judea and Samaria. They've had several Israelis injured recently because of that, and they're arresting people that are throwing rocks. Last but not least, let's talk about Iraq. Several Iranian-backed militias in Iraq have signaled their willingness to lay down their arms. And that's because they're trying to avoid getting wiped out by U.S. strikes in the near future. What you're seeing is this is Iraq and its Iranian-backed militias distancing themselves from Iran, because everybody is looking at Iran and saying there's going to be a lot of fires in Iran very shortly. And so it's surprising to see, but this likely comes because the United States has been sort of having back channel negotiations with the Iraqi government and saying to the Iraqi government, we know you're Shia, we know you're the same as Iran in that regard, but you need to have a talk with these militias in your country, or the Iraqi government is going to be punished as well. And so that's just a guess, but it's very likely that that's the reason, because I don't see any other way that the Iranian-backed militias would have agreed to lay down their arms. So very interesting times. We've got a lot going on. Folks, make sure you go to chuckholton.com and become a subscriber, a supporter over there. We're putting up a written summary of this report over there every day. We're also putting up other videos that will eventually show up on YouTube, but they get to be seen first by our supporters over at chuckholton.com. So I highly recommend you go over there and support our work. Also, please like and subscribe to this podcast. Many people are not, and by subscribing, you're not going to get spammed. You're just going to tell YouTube that more people need to see this content. So I appreciate all of you. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.